Okay, so the footage you're seeing in the background is from a game I made with 6 friends of mine over the course of 6 months. It's essentially a cozy open world game. We originally made it for the Safe in Our World game jam, where it actually won Best Game Design, but then we decided to polish it up and put it up on Steam. Now, I want to talk about how you might achieve something similar, how to make a small indie open world game this isn't a technical breakdown. It's more of a design retrospective, a light postmortem maybe, but really it's best to think of it as a list of helpful tips and some advice to follow. So what worked for me is not going to work for you, that's fine, but the advice should be broadly relevant no matter what kind of game genre you're making your open world in. So the most boring part of any video, definitions, but I promise there's a good reason I'm bringing this up. So if you just Google open world game, that generic Google AI result is gonna say open world games are video games that feature large explorable environments where players can freely roam and pursue objectives. I would hesitate adding a single line on top of that. Definitions here are going to be pretty slippery. Open world means different things to different people. Some might consider larger hub areas to be open world, others wouldn't. And honestly, gaming audience ultimately decides what these terms are and not us. So instead of getting bogged down in definition, I say don't worry too much about labels, focus on building the kind of world you want players to explore. If it's a large piece of environment that doesn't require a crazy amount of loading screens, I think you're safe to assume this is an open world experience. One more thing to mention is, do you really need to make an open world game? I think this is the first question you should ask yourself. If you're making a narrative heavy or exploration driven game, you could still achieve those experiences in other formats. Linear levels, hub areas, or small interconnected maps, environments such as the way Dark Souls, the original like Dark Souls did their level design, can totally work. So ask yourself, number one, why does my game need to be open world? Number two, is open world the only way to deliver the experience I want players to have? So that is key. I feel like the answer most of the times is not really, but spend some time on this question before committing, because making an open world game is technically, and I would argue emotionally demanding. It's a lot of work, so make sure you truly want to do this. One small note on this, I keep seeing this pop up on Reddit where people are like, I started working on my open world fantasy game and I will bet you money every single one of those times that game will not release. People in the indie space can treat open world game design in a very intelligent manner, such as Alba or A Short Hike, or they could treat it in a very dumb manner, which is trying to make Skyrim by yourself. So please don't do that. It is a miserable experience. Number one, for a small open world game, the movement system is probably the most important thing you can focus on. Players will spend most of their time moving through the world. If movement isn't fun, nothing else will matter. For example, in our game, you explored the island on a bicycle. We nearly spent 2 months making sure the biking felt fluent, responsive, and replayable. So within a 6-month development cycle, we spent 2 of those months polishing the bike to perfection. Because, at the end of the day, if somebody boots up your game and does none of the exploring, none of the story, none of the collectibles, none of the content in your world, and just moves that controller around and it feels great, then the chances of them spending more time in your world just increases. For our game in specific, also, we made it physics-based, which introduced small variations every time you moved, because that's just the unpredictable nature of how kind of physics works in games. Whatever system you choose, make sure it's amazing, whether it's walking, running, diving, driving, flying, or biking. So there's a lot there to do, kind of feel empowered to explore all of that. Even a simple walk cycle can be tuned to feel good. Avoid tedium, make sure pacing, speed, stamina, acceleration, all of these tools you are using them in a clever way. Make sure it feels right. The only way you're going to know how something feels right if you playtest it to death. So definitely do that. You want players to just have fun moving around if there's nothing else to do in the world. So I feel like that should be the bar for excellence for that. Step two, limitations. In a context of open world game, we're talking about physical constraints and limitations. So here's what I'll rant a little bit about. I don't recommend procedural generation for indie open world games unless you just using it to populate details like trees or rocks. It usually ends up eating time without producing the handcrafted feel that makes world feels memorable. Obviously, there's a caveat to this at all times. There's some guy out there who's a procedural generation genius, and he'll just, I don't know, make a whole world in a few days. Uh, from my experience, that is unlikely to be the case. The procedural generation rabbit hole is a massive one, and once you go down into it, it could get your entire project stuck and reliant on that tool. So I think it's a pretty dangerous one and you need to be really careful for. Now, in terms of physical limitations, there's a reason why so many indie open world games are set on islands. Islands naturally provide borders, helping you scope and design the game more easily. But any natural border, cliffs, ocean, skies can work. The key is defining clear limits so you can focus your design space. Expansion is always easy. I mean, there's nothing easier in game development than making something bigger than expanding things. So please, please start small and contained. I've been guilty of this so many times. I don't care how experienced you are not above that advice. Number three, so there's this saying in the tech world, it's called KISS, which means keep it simple, stupid. I'm not a big fan of abbreviations, but this one I think is excellent. And another one I would use for open world games is keep it small, stupid. So it still falls on the KISS word category. When we first started, our world was 10 times bigger than you see right now in the background. It was bloated, empty, and boring because I wanted to do this thing where going from point A to B, I want it to take like 5 minutes. I want you to really absorb the visuals around you. And we just, as we were testing, we just found out it was utterly boring. And then one of my teammates just cut the world down drastically to just a few landscape blocks in Unreal. Suddenly everything clicked. Within 2 weeks, we had a polished open world. And the reason why I say it finally clicked is because when your world is way too large, you kind of like, it's just too overwhelming and too much to work with. So actually, like, start small and then expand from there. And if you think the design space can handle further expansion, go from there. So please just start small. So step four, once your game is scoped and your movement system is solid, you need points of interest, things for players to discover. These don't have to be icons on a map or checklists objectives like a lot of AAA open world games. There's nothing wrong with those games and those design systems. They're just trying to achieve something different than what us indies are trying to do with open world games. Points of interest, they can be collectibles, characters, unique locations, or environmental landmarks, which is basically we're talking about the content of the game. Think of yourself not as a god creating a world, but as a tour guide leading players through it. When you place points of interest and how far apart they are shapes the entire mood of your game. In our game, we placed mushroom collectibles so that whenever you picked one up, you could always spot another in the distance. That design gently nudged players to keep exploring. Great open world games like Breath of the Wild mastered this technique. Skyrim does it excellently. It's that feeling of over the hill, what's over there, because I could see something over there. So whatever points of interest you have ties into my next point, which is number five, pacing. You need to pace them out. Pacing is crucial. In cozy games, pacing often revolves around the concept of home, a safe, familiar place players return to. Think of a farm in Stardew Valley or the island house you start in Alba. Our game didn't have a literal home base, by the way, which a lot of cozy games do, but the small island itself became home since players were always circling back through the same familiar spaces, and the island world is small enough to achieve that. Home is not the only aspect of pacing content away from each other so that it's worth going from point A to B. Instead of putting two NPCs next to each other, you kind of want to space them out so that traversal could be utilized best. In other genres, pacing serves different purposes. Dark Souls and Elden Ring use it to balance danger, tension, and relief. Empty stretches before a big boss fight are deliberate pacing choices that build atmosphere. I think Elden Ring does that pretty masterfully. Whatever your genre, respect your player's time. Indie open worlds are often shorter experiences, so don't pat them out with unnecessary collectibles or filler side quests. A handful of meaningful activities will always be better than hundreds of repetitive ones. Step 6, game feel. Now, I admit this is an extremely vague term, but essentially it's how satisfying actions feel, whether that's movement, combat, dialogue, or exploration. For a cozy open world game, game feel might mean lush environments, responsive dialogue, or smooth transition between interactions, but honestly, this could apply to any genre. This isn't something you finish early or recognize early on, it's something you polish iteratively throughout development. Prioritize the feel of actions that matter most to your games, though. So if I have a combat game, if I have an action game, then combat is the most important thing. In my opinion, if I have a narrative game, dialogue is the most important thing. If I have a horror game, the atmosphere and immersion of being guided through that level and how it's guided, the lighting and just everything kind of like is pretty important for a horror game. So it's truly gonna depend on your genre. For us, it was making sure exploration felt alive through collectibles, movement, and environment polish. That was like the most important thing for us. So if you play our game, the story is quite basic because that wasn't the entire point of it. We definitely tried to make it good, but we had our limitation of what kind of a game we're trying to make. So that's kind of like my list of rough tips on how to make a small open world game. I hope these insights were helpful to you. If you like more of a technical breakdown on how we actually built this world in Unreal Engine 5, let me know. Thanks for watching. Consider wishlisting my game on Steam and have a good one.